It seemed like just another morning in Washington, D.C., but inside the Department of Justice, the atmosphere was anything but ordinary. The hallways buzzed with movement as FBI, DEA, and ATF agents whispered to each other. Something big was about to go down. Outside, the media had already gathered. CNN, Fox, and NBC reporters were in position, cameras rolling, waiting for a major announcement from one of the most powerful figures in the country. Inside the building, Attorney General Pam Bondi stood in the center of a large conference room, her eyes scanning the open case files on her desk. These documents weren't just any legal paperwork. They outlined a major lawsuit against the state of New York. But this wasn't just about New York. This was the second phase of a much larger battle the DOJ had launched against states defying federal immigration laws. Illinois had been the first target. Now it was New York's turn. A knock at the door broke the silence. One of Bondi's aides stepped in. CNN, Fox, and NBC are all live. They're waiting for you. Bondi closed the files, straightened her posture, and gave a small nod. All right, time to make things crystal clear for them. Minutes later, she stepped onto the stage in the DOJ's massive press conference hall. Behind her stood a row of law enforcement officials, including FBI and DEA agents, watching in silence. As the bright camera lights switched on, the room fell into an intense hush. She adjusted the microphone and got straight to the point. We're here today because the Department of Justice is taking action against states that refuse to follow federal law. As of today, we are officially filing a lawsuit against the state of New York. Governor Kathy Hochul, Attorney General Letitia James, and DMV official Mark Schroeder. The room erupted into murmurs. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Bondi continued, her voice firm. New York has chosen to put illegal immigrants ahead of American citizens. The laws meant to protect our communities are now shielding criminals. The people standing behind me put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. But in New York, when officers pull over an illegal immigrant, they aren't even allowed to check their record. That ends today. The tension in the room was thick, but Bondi wasn't done yet. She let the weight of her words settle for a moment before driving the point home. This isn't just another lawsuit. This is a warning to every state that thinks they can ignore federal law. Illinois was first, New York is next. And if any other states continue down this path, they'll be next too. Just then, a reporter from the back row stood up and shouted, "Is this a direct attack on state rights? Are you using federal power to strong-arm states into submission?" Bondi turned to face him directly, her expression unshaken. "No, we're enforcing the law. And if anyone has a problem with that, maybe they should take a hard look at which side they're really on." For a moment, the room fell silent. Then, in an instant, reporters shot up their hands, eager to throw more questions at her. But the message was already loud and clear. This was just the beginning. Outside the room, away from the cameras, a man watched the broadcast in silence. He wasn't on stage, but he was just as involved as anyone up there. Because as Bondi had said, this was only the beginning. The tension between the White House and New York officials had reached its peak. The lawsuit filed by Pam Bondi on behalf of the Department of Justice wasn't just a legal battle, it had ignited a full-scale political war. New York Attorney General Letitia James wasted no time in firing back. She stepped up to the podium and launched a scathing attack on Bondi and the Trump administration. "This lawsuit is not about the rule of law," she declared. "It's about pushing a political agenda. New York will not bow to the threats of the Department of Justice." Her words dominated the headlines within hours, fueling an already explosive situation. But Bondi knew this fight wouldn't be won in the courtroom alone. Determined to control the narrative, she appeared live on Fox News to make her case directly to the American people. Looking straight into the camera, she laid it out bluntly. The people of New York need to decide. Do they want a government that rolls out the red carpet for criminals? Or do they want leaders who will actually protect them? Just as Bondi's message started gaining traction, the Washington Post dropped a bombshell, an alleged leaked document from inside the DOJ. The report suggested that the lawsuit had weak legal standing, claiming that parts of the case were built on shaky foundations. Democrats pounced on it immediately. A CNN analyst wasted no time tearing into Bondi's case. "This lawsuit is legally flimsy," they said. "It's bound to collapse." But Bondi wasn't caught off guard. She knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't just an attack from the outside. Someone inside the Department of Justice had leaked that information, twisting it to make her case look weaker than it actually was. The real question now was, who did it? Was there a traitor inside the DOJ, or was this sabotage coming straight from within the White House? Wasting no time, Bondi called in her closest advisors and locked the office door behind them. "Someone in this room, or someone close to us, is trying to kill this case," she said, her voice steady but firm. Only a handful of people had access to that document. If we don't figure out who leaked it, we're not just going to lose this case, we're going to lose the entire fight. Meanwhile, Trump's inner circle had also taken notice. The president himself was considering making a public statement to back Bondi and solidify her position. But not everyone inside the White House was on board. Some advisors were pushing back, arguing that the lawsuit could create more political division and ultimately hurt Trump's administration. A high-level meeting was quickly arranged in the Oval Office. Trump, sitting at his desk, slammed his hands down and cut straight to the point. "We need to find out who leaked that document. Now!" That's when Bondi got an idea. If there was a traitor among them, they needed to flush them out. The plan was simple but effective. They would create a fake internal memo, one filled with misleading details about a supposed shift in strategy regarding the lawsuit. Only a select group of people would receive it. If that information made its way to the press, the mole would be exposed. The trap was set. But Bondi knew this was just the beginning. Until she found out who was working against her from the inside, the real battle couldn't even begin. And this wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. This was about who truly held power behind the scenes in Washington. Things in Washington were reaching a boiling point. Pam Bondi's lawsuit was no longer just a legal battle. It had turned into a full-scale political war. The media, Democrats, and even some Republicans had weaponized the case, turning it into a fight for control. But the biggest threat wasn't coming from the outside. It was from within. A leak inside the Department of Justice had put Bondi's team in a tough position. The Washington Post had published classified information that could have only come from an insider. Bondi knew this wasn't just media manipulation. This was a deliberate attack aimed at undermining her and the Trump administration. There was a traitor inside the White House, and she needed to find out who it was. That night, a private meeting was set up with Trump. Behind the closed doors of the Oval Office, Bondi sat across from the president, joined by the FBI director and a few trusted DOJ officials. A printed copy of the Washington Post article was laid out on the table. Trump narrowed his eyes as he held the document, his expression cold and firm. This came from inside. The question is, who? The FBI director leaned forward. Only a handful of people had access to this information. To find out who leaked it, we need to plant specific details with certain individuals and see who passes it to the press. Bondi nodded at Trump. It's a risk worth taking. If there's a mole, we need to expose them immediately. If we don't, this won't be the last attack. Trump smirked slightly. Good, then let's bait them. The plan was put into motion right away. Select high-ranking officials in the DOJ were given fake intel, suggesting that the Trump administration was considering a strategic shift in the lawsuit. If that false information made it to the press, the traitor would be exposed. And just as expected, it worked. 2 days later, CNN ran a story. Trump administration may be backing off immigration lawsuit. The details in the article were a perfect match to the fabricated intel. Bondi and her team immediately took action. They knew exactly who had received that information, and only one of them had leaked it. A brief internal investigation inside the White House confirmed the mole's identity. A senior official within the DOJ had been secretly working with Democrats, feeding them information to sabotage the lawsuit. When Bondi's team presented their findings to Trump, the Oval Office fell silent for a moment. Then, without hesitation, Trump picked up his phone, his voice firm as he spoke 3 simple words. Get rid of him. Within hours, the DOJ official was forced to resign. But Bondi knew this was just the beginning. The political swamp in Washington was deeper than she had imagined, and there were still many who wanted her to fail. The media was still coming after her. The Democrats weren't backing down. But neither was she. This lawsuit was no longer just about New York. It had become a battle against the entire system working behind the scenes in Washington. Who do you think really holds the power? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.